Hey, we have our special guest back with us, Professor Jiang, Beijing-based educator, writer, and advocate for education reform, known for his work in promoting creativity, critical thinking, and global citizenship in Chinese schools. He gained international attention in 24 for his viral predictions about geopolitics, foreseeing Donald Trump's return to power, U.S.-Iran conflict, and U.S. losing that war based on historical patterns and game theory. Welcome back to the show, Professor Jiang. Good to see you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for inviting me back.
Now, the first thing I wanted to bring up, this happened. So I don't know if you're on this, but the United States has attacked a ship, right? So they're going to block the Strait of Hormuz. And here, let me just play. This is what Scott Ritter, this is his assessment of what happened, and I'll get your response. Hang on.
Civilians?
Well, my understanding is that there was an Iranian cargo ship was making transit out of the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf there, and in accordance with the agreement that was reached between the United States and Iran in Islamabad about the ceasefire, and an illegal American blockade that has no legitimacy under international law and is a complete violation of the ceasefire agreement, demanded that the ship stop. The ship didn't. Then the United States, the U.S. Navy vessel destroyer, told the ship to evacuate the engine room. Then they fired on the engine room, causing the ship to come to a halt. And the U.S. Marine raiding group was landed on the vessel and took control of the vessel. It is an act of piracy. There's no legitimacy for this action whatsoever.
Wow. What would be the goal of something like this? Why would Trump and Hegseth even order this?
It's pure psychological operation. This is about the United States spinning the events so that the president can claim that he has the upper hand. That if, for instance, Iran were to go to Islamabad and agree to a deal, the president would say it's only because of the strong stance that he's taken in enforcing this blockade and compelling the Iranians to see the common sense and coming to an agreement. That's all this is. It has nothing to do with legitimately stopping flow. Even let's just acknowledge that this is an illegal act, like much of what the United States does. But the goal is to effectively halt shipping out of the Strait of Hormuz by the Iranians, and this most certainly is not doing that. So it's just pure theater of the absurd.
So what is your response to the act and his assessment?
Yeah, I completely agree. So a naval blockade is considered an act of war, and so it breaks the spirit of the ceasefire. That's point number one. Point number two is that I think Scott Ritter is right in that Trump is trying to negotiate from a position of strength. But I think the more obvious explanation is that Trump and Hegseth are not serious about peace at all. Even though there is a ceasefire, we're seeing a massive military buildup in the Middle East. When the George H.W. Bush arrives in theater, possibly by Friday, the Americans will have about 60,000 troops ready to go for a massive invasion of Iran, which is what a lot of people expect to happen. So this ceasefire is pure theater. It's just a pretext to build up forces in the Middle East.
And so Trump, I announced today that on Wednesday the ceasefire will end. So that means he's going to start bombing again. They're going to start. What do you see happening on Wednesday?
So the ceasefire does expire on Wednesday. That doesn't necessarily mean that the bombing will start right away. Because remember, the Americans need to get forces in position. They need to stage the forces. And so it's possible that on Wednesday, Trump announces another 2-week ceasefire. And he doesn't really care what the Iranians say because they need time to prepare for the strike. So the Americans use something called shock and awe. So they want to go in, destroy as much as they can, and then leave with minimal civilian casualties. So they are looking to strike as hard as possible when the time is appropriate.
So let me just play you one more clip from Scott Ritter saying that if the United States does attack again, because they're stuck in the United States, Trump cannot escalate anymore without having severe consequences rain down upon the Gulf states, right? And so if Trump, it looks like does it look like to you they're getting ready for a ground invasion? They've got, 50, 60,000 troops there now? What do you think they're getting ready to do?
So from a military perspective, if the wars escalate, Then the Americans in round two will use a three-prong approach. Okay, so the first approach will be to try to economically strangle Iran. So the naval blockade will be part of that, but the Americans will also try to siege Karg Island. They will try to seize the Iranian coastline. And so what the Americans are trying to do is dislodge Iran from the Strait of Hormuz, because right now the Iranians can collect tolls off the Strait of Hormuz. They can export oil from Karg Island. And so the Americans want to blockade and contain Iran. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is to stir up ethnic tensions in Iran. And the way you do that is you establish forward operating bases in ethnic regions like Balochistan and the Kurdish region. And then you encourage and you arm ethnic insurgents against the government in Iran. And the third thing, which I think will be the most effective, is you will start to suffocate Tehran, the capital. You do that by limiting their capacity to access food, water, and electricity. You basically bomb power plants, you bomb reservoirs, and you bomb railways. And so you force the population into submission. And if you do these three strategies, the theory is that you will force Iran into a political settlement.
And what kind of settlement do they want? I mean, it seems. What do you? What has Trump even said what he wants? He said he wanted complete victory or a complete surrender. But what does that mean?
What it means is that the Americans can impose terms. So what this means is that the Iranians will have to surrender their uranium, all of their uranium. They will have to surrender the ballistic weapons program. They will have to abandon the proxies, and they will have to install the Shah as their new leader, American puppet. So those are the four conditions for surrender.
Oh, that really? Oh, okay. And what do you think the likelihood of that is?
0%.
Zero, right? Yeah, that seems crazy. So it seems like for real, they're going to again try to resume the war. That Donald Trump and the United States is going to resume the war either on Wednesday or after another phony ceasefire, giving them time to. I mean, Iran sees what they're doing. They see that they know what's coming. And so here's what Scott Ritter had to say will happen once the United States starts the war again. And I want to get your reaction to it.
Well, the Iranians have made it clear that they're not going to, start slow and finish fast. They're not going to wait for the United States and Israel to set the pace, which is what they did in the 40 days. The escalation, the nature of targets, et cetera, that were engaged by Iran were largely defined by the nature of the Israeli-American strikes against Iran. Here, the Iranians, I believe, will start with the notion that because the United States is incapable of negotiating in good faith, that you must assume that any military action that's now taken is done to eliminate the regime of the Islamic Republic, and therefore this is an existential war. Therefore, just go for the jugular from the start. And I think this is what you're going to see if we start attacking Iran. I think you're going to see Iran hit some Gulf Arab states harder than they've ever been hit Israel very hard, start taking out key infrastructure, and maybe reach out and touch the United States in a few places as well. That the United States has grown overconfident in terms of operation. But, this is going to be a one-way street. When the war starts, we will be bombing empty buildings. We will be blowing up bridges and railroad tracks that have no fundamental value from a military standpoint. And Iran is going to be, striking back with absolute devastation. And the defeat will be obvious after the first 3 days when, as I said, perhaps Abu Dhabi, Dubai, maybe another city will be unable to sustain life on the scope and scale necessary to be to retain the stature that they enjoy today. People will be forced to flee by the hundreds of thousands.
So do you agree with that assessment? That's what we've been saying here all along, that if Trump escalates or resumes this war, that they have the ability to knock out the Gulf states' desalination plants, and then that's game over for them. What do you say?
I completely agree. So the most obvious thing that the Iranians can do is close off the Red Sea, and then they can strike at Gulf energy infrastructure. They can destroy the pipelines. This will knock out 1/3 of the world's energy supply. This would completely destroy the Gulf states. They were no longer viable But the problem is that the Americans have made a calculation that this is an acceptable cost, that they are willing to take the risk. And the reason why is that in January, the Trump White House announced something called the National Security Strategy. And so this is the Pentagon strategy moving forward for the next 5 to 10 years. And that's 4 major pillars that help us explain why the war is progressing the way it is in the Middle East. The first major pillar is to secure the Western Hemisphere, the American home front. The second pillar is to contain China. The third pillar is to make better use of American allies, to basically encourage them to participate more in global defense. The fourth pillar is to ramp up America's wartime industrial production. Okay, and we're already seeing these 4 pillars play out. So from an American perspective, the goal is to create Greater North America, something called a technate, Fortress America, and then this will become a self-sufficient perimeter that allows America to sell resources, weapons, and financing to the rest of the world. And what America will do is create balance of power in each different region. So in East Asia, Japan and China will balance each other out, and they will both become dependent on American armaments, American resources, and American financing. Something will happen in Europe where Russia and Europe, NATO, will balance each other out, and both will become dependent again on America. And in East Asia, in West Asia, it will be the Gulf states and Israel versus Iran. And this is what's laid out in national security strategy. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is the strategy being played out in real time.
So why would China, Japan, Russia, what's their move? I can't see them just letting this happen. Can you?
Right. So there's only one actual response to America's national security strategy, and it is for Russia, Iran, and China to work together to create a continental trade bloc that can then absorb Africa, the Middle East, and Europe and East Asia, and sort of negate American naval power. And that's why this war in Iran is happening, because Iran is really the pivot. It is where Russia's north-south trade corridor runs through. It is where Europe's IMAC corridor runs through. It is where China's Belt and Road Initiative runs through. So if you can create chaos in Iran, the world is no longer able to trade in Eurasia. It's completely dependent on sea for trade, and it needs energy, right? So basically, what America is trying to do is create as much chaos around the world as possible so that the nations are dependent on American energy.
And again, so what do you think? I mean, Russia is very oil rich, and they what do you think? What will they do? I mean, they'll. So tell me. I mean, I'm like in materially, what will they do?
Right. So what's happening right now is that the Americans are imposing a naval blockade on all ocean trade. Right. So we're seeing, as you mentioned, this Iranian ship returning from China being boarded, being like seized and kidnapped by the Americans. We're also seeing Russian shuttle fleet tankers being boarded by the Americans as well. We're also seeing this past month oil refineries fires all around the world. So the most famous case was in Geelong, Australia, where a refinery was suspiciously and accidentally on fire, destroying Australia's access to jet fuel. We're also seeing fires in Bucharest, Romania, in India, in Myanmar. We're also seeing the Ukrainians start to strike Russian energy infrastructure. So what's happening right now is basically a war over energy resources between Russia and America. And we will see this war expand over the next few years as Russia challenges American dominance in the seas and as both continue to destroy each other's energy resources.
So this is really going to be World War III, and it's going to be for a while. So It's very popular to say that the United States did this war because Donald Trump is controlled by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Zionists, and Israel. But the way I hear you explaining it now, it seems like some kind of bigger, long game that the United States is playing for. We've talked about the Greater North American Project here, and
Yes.
Was that just kind of a diversion that to blame it on Israel, or is that real, or has the establishment been planning this all along, and Donald Trump is just their tool?
So first point is that if you don't believe anything I say, then go to the Pentagon website, the Department of War website, and download the National Security Strategy. It is in black and white. It tells you exactly what the plan is. It is to contain China. It is to control the Western Hemisphere, something called the Dore Doctrine, and it is to cannibalize America's allies. Okay, it's very black and white in that paper. That's the first point. Second point is that Trump doesn't have the power to do whatever he wants. I mean, he is really the agent or the puppet or the scapegoat for the military-industrial complex. And the third point I will make is that if you just look at history, when empires decline, they behave in this manner where the empire, at its height, it relies on consent. It relies on soft power. When it declines and its allies turn away from the empire, what the empire does is use force, use piracy, use pure power. Might becomes right. So what America is doing right now fits into the classical imperial decline pattern.
Yeah. So, okay. And so, I mean, you said that the United States was going to lose this war or get stuck in a quagmire. Do you see this working out? Where do you see this heading in the next 3 to 6 months?
Right. So again, if you just look at history, these things never work out because there are three problems with this plan. It sounds great on paper, right? Where America controls the Western Hemisphere. It has all the resources of the world. It's self-sufficient. The rest of the world is at war and needs to buy American weapons and resources. But if you look at history, it doesn't really work out for three reasons. The first major reason is corruption. Okay, so America right now is a very corrupt system, and we know because whenever Trump makes an announcement, someone with impeccable timing is able to short the market and make hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So when Trump announced a ceasefire, then someone buys shorts and makes a lot of money off of the oil market. So this has been happening a lot. But really, the problem in America is the financialization of the system. And so people make their money not making things, but on speculation. And this is a pretty common theme in American political system right now. So, Trump has announced $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon. And you said this on your show, but most of this money is going to go into corruption. It's going to be stolen. It won't actually go into weapons production. So that's the first problem, the corruption. Second problem is political polarization. So when empires are in decline, they usually split up into different factions that fight each other. They really don't care about the consequences for America's position in the world stage. All they are concerned about are domestic politics. So even though America's at war in Iran, the Democrats continue to snipe at Trump. And Trump continues to snipe at Democrats. So Trump is much more concerned about the Democrats than he is about winning this war in Iran. So political polarization is a huge problem in America, and it could possibly lead to a civil war. That's the second problem. And the third problem is nationalism. When you bully nations, like what America is doing right now to the Europeans, right? So Trump says that he's going to take over Greenland, which has really annoyed the Europeans. He's discussed taking over Mexico, Canada. So what this does is that it galvanizes the people and makes them much more nationalistic. And we can see this, and we'll see this happen over the next few years as the Americans demand more of the South Koreans, of the Japanese, and this will make them much more nationalistic, much more anti-American. Same thing will happen in Europe as well. So these three factors, corruption, division, and nationalism, ultimately means that the empire will die at the end of the day.
Do you have a timeline on that? So I was before this Iranian war, I was just worried about the world stop using the dollar as the reserve currency. That was my big worry. And I was just worried about how quickly that was going to happen, which is why we've talked so much about investing in gold and stuff on this show, because when the rest of the world stops using the dollar, that it's horrible for the United States, I mean, and us and our retirement savings and everything, which is tied up in dollars. So you're talking about what is the end of so you keep saying this isn't going to work out, right? You've already delineated the problems with this working. It sounds like a great idea. I hear people say it, talk about it, but it's not going to work. So where do you see the United States in, say, like 5 years?
Sure. So there's actually a 3-stage process when empires decline. Okay, so in the first stage, the empire lashes out and forces it kind of cannibalizes, vassalizes its allies. Okay, and in the first stage, things look great. The U.S. dollar soars. The American economy soars because the world is dependent on LNG from the United States. The reality is that it's possible that Trump goes to China in mid-May and they sign a deal in which China is buying more LNG from America, in which case Trump's going to look like a political genius, right? Because he's attacking Iran, he's managed to humble China. So in the short term, things look great for the empire because the world is completely dependent on American resources, especially energy, LNG. So that's the first stage. But in the second stage...
Well, can I stop you there?
Sure.
The problem is that plays right into the way American businessmen and our economy thinks. We think in short-term quarterly profits. We don't build for the long term. And so Trump probably doesn't care. He'll look, it'll make the next the last 2 years of my presidency look like a victory. And I exit, I'm 82 years old as a victor, right? That's right.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly the problem. He's only thinking for the next 2-3 years, which are going to be great for America. But then afterwards, what happens? What happens is that you are over leveraged. Your empire is overextended. You're forced to call up a national draft in order to supply the cannon fodder for your empire. Your economy is overheated. It becomes a huge Ponzi scheme. And slowly, the rest of the world recognizes that we need to unite against America if we are to survive. In the third stage, the world goes to war against America on multiple fronts: the economic front, the diplomatic front, the military front. And then America recognizes that it cannot actually sustain its empire, and its empire declines and dies.
And so that when the empire dies, that means for sure civil war, right? In the United States.
Exactly. For sure. Exactly.
And then we'd have to create a new government, create a new constitution, and all that stuff, right? Well, we started from scratch. Is that how it works?
So, if you just look at America as an empire, it is most equivalent to Rome. And when Rome started its civil war process, it never really stopped its civil wars. I mean, you might have an emperor emerge and create a 20-year peace, but then when he dies, the civil war starts again. And so the reason why America may fall into a civil war trap, where it is continuous civil war, is that America has no peer competitor in the Western Hemisphere. And as a result, all the conflicts are internal, not external, right? So an empire, when it falls, it fights civil wars, but when it's threatened by an external enemy, it unifies against its foe. But America doesn't have a foe. It doesn't have a competitor. So America could actually descend into hundreds of years of civil war.
And so, okay, so your prediction is that in the next few years, this will look like a brilliant plan to certain people. Yes. Because the dollar will soar and China's going to be buying more of our liquid gas. And but how soon does that end? And it starts to go the other way.
Right. So I think it's entirely possible that if Trump pulls this off and he succeeds, he might get a third term. And so I think, for the next 2 to 3 years, this plan will look really, really strategic and genius. But again, this is how all empires behave when they decline. So this is a natural process.
So you say we're not going to break off into civil war and fragmentation for at least 5 years? 10?
Right. Yeah. So I think the civil war, the process begins if Trump gets his third term. Right. So I say a Trump third term because if you want to carry this plan out to fruition, you need a pretty stable continuity of agenda. Right. So it's entirely possible that if Trump leaves office in 2028, the Democrats come to power and they change this plan, which would create complete chaos. So you need a continuum agenda. You need basically a monarch in place in order to implement the strategy. And if that were the case, this would create a constitutional crisis, and this would be the basis for a civil war.
So if you see this coming, so clearly, and history says this is what's coming, the people in Europe must know it's coming, but why do you think they're not reacting in the way a rational government would react knowing this is coming? They seem to be almost, in a sense, going along with Trump. They're now doubling down on their war with Russia for who knows why. What's Europe's role in all this, and why are they doing it like they're doing?
Right. So another characteristic of an empire in decline is the over-bureaucratization of society. And what this leads to...
The over what?
The over-bureaucratization. Sorry, the bureaucratization of society. The bureaucracy. Right? You create an imperial bureaucracy.
Bureaucratization? Is that what you're saying?
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
You create an imperial bureaucracy that becomes a bubble onto itself. Right? So if you go to Washington, D.C., I'm sure you've been to Washington, D.C.,
yes.
It's a bubble. Right? It's the richest place in the world. They could care less about what happens in the rest of America and in the rest of the world. Same thing in Europe, where you have an imperial bureaucracy in Brussels. So people in Brussels just care about collecting their paycheck, collecting their pension, and they want to just keep their jobs. And so they're going to go with the flow. And they become completely divorced from reality, right? That's why you've seen in these past 10 years this massive surge of immigration into Europe, even though Europe itself cannot sustain this immigration. And the response to criticism is to silence critics, right? So in Europe, if you're a criminal, you're much less likely to get visited by the police than if you criticize the rise of crime on social media, right? So if you make a criticism on social media, you're much more likely to get visited by the police than if you actually commit a real crime. So Europe is, I think, it's basically become a dumpster fire. It's a much more advanced stage of decline than America.
So basically, just people looking out for, again, short-term thinking, people looking out for their own self-interest, not their country's interests, not the long-term interests, and so is it the strength of the international military-industrial complex that they get more, and they're doubling down on the war in Ukraine. They're doubling down on is that just what it is? And
yes.
Okay, and
yeah.
So
because Julian Assange said it best. The point is not to have successful wars. The point is to have never-ending wars. Because what wars do is they transfer taxpayer money into the pockets of a transnational elite, and that's the point of war today. It's not to win wars; it's to have wars.
It's just. I mean, I still can't. I'm kind of shocked, right, that there isn't some, there's no sober voices inside the United, there's like maybe Thomas Massey, maybe Rand Paul, but there's no like group of people that it's all just I guess I shouldn't be surprised because I've been saying it for years now that the United States is not just a little corrupt, like Joe Biden gives his kid a no-show job and Trump gives his kid a deal with Saudi Arabia, but it's 100% corrupt. Like they're all corrupt. No, when they get a session of Congress, they're not there doing the bidding. I've said this a million times. They're not doing the bidding of students or workers or the elderly or trying to fix the infra. They're there just doing the bidding. How can we extract wealth from the taxpayers and put it into the pockets of the people you just described, the WEF international elite, the globalists, and that's what. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised, right? I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. So another issue that people don't really discuss is the aging problem in America, where the leadership in Washington D.C. have aged a great deal. Right, the baby boomers are still in control. Think of how many presidents were baby boomers. Right, you had Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Biden. I mean, like Trump. I mean, the baby boomers have been in command for a long, long time. What we know is that when a population ages, the elite, they become much more authoritarian, right? So if you're an old person, you're in your 80s, what you care about is living for as long as possible. You care a lot about germs. You care about keeping the streets clean, and so you basically want a more authoritarian society, and that's why I think a lot of young people today are so pessimistic about the future.
Do you put any credence? So there's a lot of theories out there that COVID was a depopulation agenda because the international bankers and the WEF types, they realized that they can't sustain the aging populations, and so they did this vax, which has it's completely toxic, and it has negative efficacy, and they had to rig all the numbers in the systems. Like, for instance, if you died within 14 days of getting your vax, they considered you unvaccinated, even though there could be a correlation between you dying from the vax. So they had to do all that. So do you put any credence into that theory that there is this kind of, because it was a global phenomena that it wasn't just the United States, it was everywhere except for maybe Africa. So do you think that there's any credence to that idea that the people in control, really the handful of billionaires that run the world, really did want a depopulation agenda?
If that were their plan, I'd be very impressed. I don't think they're that smart, and I don't think they're that strategic. I think that COVID happened because the baby boomers are really afraid of germs. And that's why you had these global lockdowns, because the baby boomers insisted on everyone staying at home. So the nation that best responded to COVID was Sweden, because the epidemiologists in Sweden said that you can't stop a virus; it's impossible. So we're not going to disrupt the economy. We're not going to disrupt schooling, but we will protect our vulnerable people, which includes people with diseases, which includes the elderly population.
Which is basically the Barrington Declaration.
Basically. And it worked very well for Sweden. Their economy was not as impacted as the rest of the world. But having gone away with the COVID lockdowns, we can expect that the elite will use this strategy again if a crisis were to emerge, right? So they're not strategic, but they're opportunistic. They don't think ahead, but they see the benefits of certain strategies. So if this war were to continue, we can imagine lockdowns because of the energy crisis.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. So that's why they'll be able to, people have already talked about it, that there's going to be energy lockdowns and that they're going to have surveillance, and they're going to let you know how much energy you're allowed to use. And once you exceed that, they're going to cut you off. They're going to stop your car. They're going to stop all that kind of. And do you see that happening?
Yes, it's all part of the plan, right? The technate calls for a technocracy. What is technocracy? A government ruled by AI. That's why America's building all these data centers, even though they cost a lot of money. They don't really actually turn any profit, right? So if you are a company like OpenAI, like the more subscribers you have, the more money you lose, because it actually costs you more money to have subscribers than you can generate profit for them. But you have Operation Stargate in place, $500 billion to build data centers all across America. So why would they do that? And the answer is the technocracy. The answer is you eventually, if you're moving towards an empire, you need to create an AI surveillance state, digital currency, digital ID, and it helps you do a national draft. It helps you control the people. It helps you ration energy and food.
And so how there do you see a way to turn this around, or is this already, this is in the cards because history dictates and they've, is there I mean, could there be a charismatic leader who turns this around for the United, but they would just kill him, right?
Yeah, so I don't think this plan will work out because the empire is in decline. They're desperate, right? So they want a national draft. They want a AI control grid. This is all part of their plan. But the people in charge aren't that bright, and they're not that effective. And I think this is all going to blow up in their face because I think the American people are much more resilient, much more creative than they believe. It's worked out in China. If you come to China, I'll show you around. We have AI surveillance. We have AI digital currency and digital ID, and it's worked out well in China. But the Chinese people are a different breed. The American people love freedom. They love liberty, and I think that the Americans would rather fight than surrender their liberty.
And so now I'm hearing you say another, like, so there is a chance that the American people, because we do value our freedom, although you couldn't tell, half the country certainly didn't during COVID. They were willing to accept every single restriction on their freedom, and including fascist Nazi-like impositions of forcing people to take experimental medical treatments. So you think that the answer to this lies in the mass of people coming together?
So yeah, the COVID lockdowns were bad in America, but they were nowhere near as bad as that in China or Canada, right? In Canada, there were the trucker protests, and these were just people who wanted a meeting with Justin Trudeau because they had questions about the vaccine mandate, and instead they were debanked. If you actually gave $1 to the truckers, you also debanked. So Canada is far more authoritarian than the United States. In the United States, if you didn't like the vaccine mandate, you moved somewhere else. You moved to a red state that didn't have these vaccine mandates. You couldn't do that in China. You couldn't do that in Canada. You couldn't do that in Europe. So I think that America is really the best hope for the world. Unfortunately, the people in charge, even though they're not that strategic, even though they're not that smart, they are pretty evil. So we can imagine that they will promote false flag operations. They will promote civil wars in order to justify the use of a AI surveillance state.
And so you see our empire in decline. It might work for the next couple of years. And when you say Trump will get a third term, you mean they'll amend the Constitution to make that happen?
Right. So I actually don't know the legal technicalities here, but what I do understand is that there's actually nothing in the Constitution that prevents Trump from running as a vice president in 2028 and having his son, Don Jr., run at the top of the ticket. And then when they win in 2028 by rigging the election, then Don Jr. can just abdicate, and then Trump will be the president again for the next 8 years.
I never thought of that. Isn't that funny? I never thought that he would run as vice president. That seems so sinister. So you don't predict a collapse like by the end of the 2026 or 27 or even 28, but do you think that? So we're moving into a multipolar world then, right?
So the world right now, it's over leveraged, it's overextended. We've mortgaged the future in order to enjoy the present. An example is that right now the population of the Earth is about 8 billion people, but that's being supported by fertilizers, by oil, by medicine. So if the world were to deglobalize and deurbanize, then people would lack access to fertilizers and cheap energy. And this would mean that we would see a steep population decline over the next 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've seen videos recently of, people from the Club of Rome talking about this decades ago, that
Yes.
we can only sustain maybe 1 or 2 billion people on this
That's
planet.
right.
And I just can't believe that, like this. So how come this stuff doesn't get taught in schools? How come people don't talk about this in colleges? How come it's taking Donald Trump to make these kind of conversations come to the surface? Do you have any theory on that?
Well, I mean, public schools were created to brainwash you, to indoctrinate you. I know because I've worked in education reform for the past 20 years. So I know how screwed up the school system is. There's one word you're never allowed to say in education reform. I've been to a lot of education conferences around the world, and no one ever talks about the elephant in the room, which is the idea of a meritocracy. Why is it that you have a hierarchy in the school system where if you're smart, you're allowed to go to a good school, but if you're dumb, you're not allowed to go to school at all? And the reason is control. The reason is indoctrination. The people who graduate from the Ivy League, and I know because I went to Yale, are the biggest ass kissers in the world. They're not smarter than you. They're not better than you. They just happen to stick up to authority better than you. And that's just the nature of the school system that we have today.
That is true. I've noticed the people that came from Ivy League schools to Hollywood, and they excel quickly, and it's through ass kissing. They know exactly how to do it. They know exactly whose ass to kiss, and I've noticed it in my own little corner of Hollywood.
Sorry, Jimmy. If you spend like a week at Yale going to classes, you'd be shocked by the level of education at Yale and Harvard. You'd be like, oh my God, these are the smartest people in the world. Oh my God, this is the level of elite education that we have today. You'd be shocked.
Yeah. I mean, I always claimed that, I was a C student. I was, because I wasn't interested in school at all. And, but yeah, when I meet these people, I'm not as impressed as I should be. That's right. That's for sure. And, especially
but you know what I admire about you, Jimmy, is that even though you're a C student, you're still curious, you're open-minded, you appreciate debate, you ask good questions, and that's a secret to learning in life.
Let me just switch the subject just a little bit for a second. I'm still shocked. I'm constantly shocked. I'll never stop being shocked at the people who got everything wrong during COVID. Not only did they get it wrong, but they embraced authoritarianism to shut other people up like me, who were just asking questions because I noticed something, and I was asking relevant questions that they were afraid. So they're not afraid. They're afraid of the questions. And these people still today will call ivermectin horse paste, or they'll still swear by the vaccine. They'll still call people anti-vax, even though we know what a failure that COVID vaccine was. They still, like, as if it's 5 years ago. And these are, relatively intelligent people in every other way. And it's like they are going out of their way to stay ignorant. And have you noticed that? And what is?
Yes.
Go.
Yes. I went to Yale, so I encounter this all the time. But in the 1950s, C. Wright Mills wrote a book called The Power Elite, and he describes the structure of power in America. And he makes a very interesting point in the book, which is like, it's not the elite, the power elite, that are most dedicated to the system. It's the intellectual class, the chattering class, the professors, the intellectuals, the journalists who are most dedicated to the system, because these are the parasites of the system, and they understand that their power comes from the proximity to the elite. And so they are the most vocal about protecting the legitimacy of the system as well as the elite. Okay, so these journalists, these intellectuals, these professors, these academics, they're most dedicated to maintaining COVID because they believe that by doing so, that's what allows them to maintain their power. Because think about what AI could do. With the coming of AI, the people, these white-collar people are most at risk, right? These lawyers, these accountants, these teachers, because AI can just do what they do at a cheaper price. So they need to be able to justify their existence, their high salaries, their very easy lifestyle, where a professor works like 6 months of the year. And they do that by trying to impose authority on the common mass, and saying, you see, we are useful because we can control the masses. But the reality is that with the rise of social media, with the rise of shows like yours, they can no longer do so. And that's why they're so desperate. That's why they're so anxious. And that's why they're so authoritarian today.
So it's, who was the stuff? Didn't we have, who was that female Chinese author who wrote that 40-page book? And she talked about this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Talked about the class, the
Yeah,
professional class.
She talked about the professional managerial class.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what you're talking about right now. And she and she noticed the exact same thing, right?
Exactly.
That they became and I like to call them, they're supposed to be
Catherine Liu.
Catherine Liu, that's who it was. And
yes.
And so, I call them illiberal. They talk about they're liberals, right? And they're supposed to be a liberal and conservative. There is no liberals anymore in the United States. They're all the people who consider themselves liberals don't realize that they become the most illiberal people in the world. And that, go ahead.
They're only interested in maintaining their privileges, right?
Yes.
Again, these are people who don't really work. They just spend all their time talking and projecting authority. And they have the easiest life. They're basically parasites, and so they need to maintain their existence. They need to legitimize their lifestyle.
Well, I'll tell you, speaking to this point, so I've gotten into Jungian psychology over the last 6 years, and it's completely changed my life and outlook on things completely. And I used to be an atheist, and now I understand that was incorrect. And what I've done, so I once a week I would talk to this Jungian psychiatrist or a psychologist, and he would help interpret my dreams. And because you need someone else to do that for you, and recently, and so I only would have an hour, and we'd only get through maybe 1 or 2 dreams. And I have lots of dreams. I have 3 or 4 dreams a night, right? And so it was, and I can't afford to do more than 1 session a week because they're expensive. They charge a lot of money. And so what I've started to do recently in the last few weeks is to use Grok, and I'll put in my dream. And as soon as I wake up, I put it in Grok and I say, please use Jungian analysis and tell me what this means. And then it is unbelievable. And it's on point. And then I'll instead of starting a different thread, I keep it in the, I go to do these dreams go together, and Grok is showing me how a dream from 2 weeks ago connects with the dream I had last night, and how all the ones and they connect all of and that is so much more conclusive, or I don't know, or encompassing than I get from my. So I'm experiencing this in my real life. I don't know if I need my Jungian psychologist anymore, because I'm getting this done in way better time. I get more time with it anyway, and it's much more encompassing. And so would that's kind of what you're talking about, and what Catherine was talking about, right?
Yes. I mean, we're seeing the collapse of the elite intellectual class, right? So we look at the New York Times. Who reads New York Times nowadays, right? It's these boomers that read New York Times.
Bill Maher reads
right.
it.
So all they do is just appeal to the boomer class with these talking points of empire, and the rest of the population is turning off, right? So we're seeing a lot of desperation and anxiety among the intellectual elite.
Where do you see Israel ending up?
Right. So Israel, it has it. I mean, it's a crazy place, right? I mean, like they don't mind going to war with the world because that's just part of their eschatology. That's they believe that if they go to war with the world, then the Messiah will come and lead them to victory. So Israel has descended into this fanatical religious outlook, and it's not going to get better. It's just going to get worse and worse. And we can see that Israel will eventually draw Turkey into this war. This will become a regional conflagration. But at the same time, as long as the United States supports Israel, then Israel will continue to dominate the Middle East. And if the United States were to lose this war, then CENTCOM would be incorporated into the Greater Israel Project. So I think that Israel will continue to rise.
Well, I really don't see, when you say if the United States were to lose this war, it's Iran is going to wipe out the Gulf states if the United States continues this war, which it looks like they're going to. So the Gulf states will be like, how do they not? I can see this. How can they not see this? And why aren't they taking steps to do anything about it?
Well, because if you're the UAE, you are in a very tough pickle, right? Because option one is that you want the United States to leave the Middle East, in which case Iran becomes a top dog, and now you have to pay reparations to Iran for the war because the Americans destroyed a lot of infrastructure. They killed the supreme leader, and the Iranians will want about $1 trillion in reparations. And they can't exact that from the United States because the United States is out an ocean away, but they can certainly demand that of the UAE, right? So that's option one. Option two is you fight this war to the bitter end because there's a chance that the United States defeats Iran, in which case you can continue to do what you do, which is to be like, this money laundering operation for the world. So those are your two options. And they're not great options, but option two has option two, it's a better payout than option one.
Like I don't. Let's say I was the Saudi prince. My big idea. I mean, again, C student here, but I would get all the Gulf states together and form an alliance with China and Russia and Iran, and that wouldn't that be? And then, Europe would probably follow suit. See which way the wind is blowing. I don't know. Is that stupid of me to say those things?
Right. So the issue is that these Gulf states are a creation of empire.
Yeah.
Meaning that, 50, 60 years ago,
right.
These were not prosperous places. And because of the petrodollar, because America was willing to provide defense to the GCC, and because America was able to support the GCC economies, they prosper and they urbanize. So they're essentially vassals of America. If America were to leave the Middle East, then the people would probably rise up and overthrow the elite because they are corrupt, they are pretty evil people, and they're incompetent as well.
And so I get it that even makes it make more sense for them to try to get rid of Israel, the United States, and create an alliance with the other two superpowers in the world, being China and Russia, and then of course, the strategic power, which is Iran. It just, again, I don't understand why the end of the road is obvious. Iran is going to wipe them out. They're going to be wiped out, right? Am I wrong about this? How do they get through the next year?
So there's a conspiracy theory that the Saudi royal family are crypto Jews. I'm not sure if you've come across this theory.
I haven't.
Right. So in 2003. The Americans went to Baghdad and they took control of the government and they had access to all of the intelligence files of Saddam Hussein. And the Saddam Hussein and his people were absolutely convinced that the Saudi royal family are crypto Jews. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by that. So the House of Saud came to power because of their alliance with the Wahhabi religious movement. And both are creation of the British Empire in order to destabilize the Ottoman Empire. And at this time in history, and this was like the 19th century, early 20th century, the British were working very closely with people called the Dome in the Ottoman Empire. The Dome are crypto Jews. These are followers of Senpai Zevi, who declared himself the Jewish Messiah in 1666. And on the surface, they believe in Islam, but at home, secretly, they still practice their Jewish faith. And these are called the Dome. And these are the people who sponsored the Young Turk movement to overthrow the Ottoman Empire and establish the Republic of Turkey. So these are the people who run Turkey today. And a faction of them worked very closely with the British, and the British installed them throughout the Gulf states, including the UAE and including Saudi Arabia. So that's a conspiracy theory. Okay, I don't have any evidence, but that's what a lot of people believe happened, and that's why the UAE and Saudi Arabia are so close with Israel, and that's why they're so supportive of American empire.
Wow, no, I haven't. Why do they call them crypto Jews?
Because they are secretly Jews. They're not like they convert to Christianity or Catholicism or Islam on the surface, right? They on the surface, outside in public, they do everything that a Muslim or a Christian would do, but at home, among their private circle, they still practice the Kabbalah.
Oh. And so what do you make? I've asserted this many times on the show that the greatest trick the Zionists have pulled off was to get Christians to believe their number one enemy were Muslims, whereas the Muslim world actually venerates Jesus, the Mother Mary, as the opposite of what the Jewish culture does. And would you agree with that assessment?
I completely agree. So before the creation of the state of Israel, the Jews and the Muslims got along really, really well. In fact, the second largest Jewish population in the Middle East outside of Israel is actually in Iran, in Tehran.
Yeah.
Right? So the Muslims have made a point of welcoming Jews because they see Jews as a holy people along. And so in the year 1492, the Spaniards expelled the Jews from Spain. Right? And it was the Ottoman Turks, the Ottoman Empire, that sent ships to help the Jews move to the Ottoman Empire. So the Jews were expelled from Christian Europe and they moved to the Ottoman Empire where they were welcomed with open arms.
Okay. So
and look, if you look at these extreme Islamic movements, including ISIS, including the Wahhabis, they were clearly creations of the Anglo-American Empire.
Clearly.
Right? You look at ISIS. They never attacked Israel for whatever reason.
Clearly.
Right? They attacked everywhere else in the Middle East, but they never attacked Israel.
100%. I've been making that point for quite a while now. Yes, that, well, look who's the head of Syria right now, installed by Israel and the United States. It's the former chief head chopper of Al-Qaeda. And he's working hand in hand with Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, he's publicly said he wants to be in partnership with it. It's just so obvious. And the people in America are such suckers. And that it's one thing to be suckered; it's another thing to keep being suckered. And people, you weren't allowed. So again, the thing about when you're not allowed to question something, like you weren't allowed to question 9/11, and now I know that 9/11 was not what it seemed to be at all. It was not what it was. They needed a 9/11 so they could go and do what they're doing. And this was all part of the greater Israel project. What people don't realize is that, as you mentioned, there's a greater North America project, and it's got a technate state. And we've talked about this on this. So the only way to kind of save Western civil or the world right now is for the American people to wake up to this, right? And
yes.
do you think they will, or what do you think? What does history tell us?
So the only hope for the world right now is the American people, because the people in charge, the elite, they've colonized so many different parts of the world. Like China is a colony of the elite, of the national elite. People don't recognize this, but China is very subservient to the global elite. Europe, Canada. So the best hope for the world is the American people recognize what's happening and they resist. And quite honestly, there's one movement in America right now that has the most promise, and that's MAGA, right? So if Tucker Carlson were to run for president of the United States and MAGA were to fully unify behind him, then I think there's hope for the world.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it MAGA, because the MAGA has been completely flipped on what it was when Donald Trump became president. It was made up of people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Dave Smith and even Joe Rogan and Theo Von, and that's all gone. Now it's all the people who were never MAGA are now what Donald Trump refers to as MAGA. So I would say the former iteration of MAGA, which Tucker Carlson could very easily lead, and he's very good at bringing people together now, which is crazy. And now, looking through looking backwards, you see how he was demonized only when he started to do the right thing. The establishment loved him. The left always hated him because divide and conquer is what the establishment does. But he got in trouble with his bosses when he started to see through it, and he saw through the empire, and he saw through the war machine, and you can't do that, and that's why he got kicked out of his establishment position. Do you think that's let's say Tucker Carlson ran for president, wouldn't they just kill him?
I'm most impressed with Tucker Carlson. And not only do I think his heart is in the right place, as you say, he's been the most consistent anti-war voice in the mainstream American media for the longest time. And that's very brave of him. But I also think he has a very good read on the political winds in America. He's also like an American patriot. He loves America deeply in his heart. And so I think there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who secretly support him, right? I mean, like I don't think that everyone in Washington, D.C. is corrupt and willing to sell out. I think there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who are just hoping that a leader emerges that can represent the true America, who will restore America to its former greatness. And I would not be surprised if there are a lot of people in the deep state itself who are very supportive of a resurgent America under Tucker Carlson.
And so the more I look at things, the more I'm convinced that Donald Trump's assassination attempts were faked, and they were inside jobs, especially Butler, Pennsylvania. And the key piece of evidence is that Donald Trump is not interested in who actually tried to do that. The conspiracy behind it, it's just a lone nut who was able to somehow get through all. Why aren't they watching the roofs? Nobody's watching the roof at Butler, Pennsylvania, even though the crowd saw him. Same thing with Charlie Kirk. There's a roof. There's a guy on the roof for at least a couple of minutes with a rifle, and nobody in the security saw him. It's impossible, right? So this, do you? I know. So I am convinced that Donald Trump was in on that Butler, Pennsylvania thing. And what do you think about it?
Well, it certainly helps us understand why there's a disparity between the first term and the second term, right? So in the first term, all of Washington was unified against Trump. They tried to sabotage him from day one, right, with this Russia gate hoax. The mainstream media was clearly against Trump. So when Trump ordered the American troops out of Syria, he was just ignored by the military.
Yes.
You had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, call the Chinese and say, "Hey, don't listen to what this guy says. We're in charge." That's treason.
Yeah.
Right. And so in the first term, there were a lot of leaks. There were a lot of turnover. In the second term, you see a lot more discipline. You see Trump actually carrying out a plan. And so it's entirely possible that what happened was that At the end of his first term, the deep state, there were many political factions that tried to destroy Trump once and for all, right? So January 6th was clearly a stage operation by the FBI, in my opinion.
Clearly.
And then after he left office, there was the raid, the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. There was lawfare. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to put him in prison. They tried to remove him from the ballot box. And he was really in a lot of trouble. So at that point, he had no choice but to make a deal with the deep state, saying that, look, Biden is useless. Putin's going to control the world if we continue to have Biden in the office, but Biden's not going to leave office voluntarily. So let's make a deal. We'll allow you to go back into office, but you have to promote our agenda, which is the American Empire agenda. And maybe Butler, Pennsylvania was a ritual in order to seal the deal, right? Because if you actually look at the specifics of the assassination, where Trump's ear was bleeding and he didn't have a shoe, that actually fits into a biblical description of a prophet or a Messiah, and it's in the Bible. I believe it's in Leviticus, right? So not only was it staged, but it was staged as a religious ritual in order to anoint Trump to be the avatar or basically the scapegoat for the deep state.
Same thing with Charlie Kirk's public assassination. They had to do it publicly, right? That was also some kind of ritual killing, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, yeah. There are a lot of ritual aspects to that assassination. And
where do these rituals come from? Can you speak to it?
So I don't know the specifics, but I imagine these are Freemasonic rituals that involve the Kabbalah. And they are all part of the Freemasonic mythology, right? So if you look at the JFK assassination, you look at the Charlie Kirk assassination, these are all come from a certain mythology in the Freemason world.
Yeah. Did you hear about so Candace Owens has been saying that the Charlie Kirk's assassination was a military operation, which it's clear that they were certainly involved, and the freak out over her discovering the Fort Huachuca connection was again proof of this. And then did you hear that? So there was maroon, lots of single individuals wearing maroon at the event with Charlie Kirk's assassination, and then that's the color of the French military. And then she's saying that there was a Masonic lodge made up of ex-French military that the French government just recently charged them as being an assassination ring. Did you hear about that? And this fits into that perfectly, right?
Yeah, so this would not surprise me. Also, we have to remember, this happened in Utah, which is where the Mormons are.
Yes.
The Mormons are a very important part of the deep state. So this is probably an operation that involved a lot of different deep state factions.
Yes, so coming together. It wasn't just one. It wasn't just the Mossad. Yes. It wasn't just the CIA. It wasn't just the French military. It was the Mormons, that all those people can get, and Donald Trump and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are completely aware of this happening, and they know that if they try to go against it, they're going to end up like Charlie Kirk themselves, right?
Yes, and we know what happened after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, right? There's no longer any major opposition towards this war in Iran.
Right. He was the only one. I mean, he was certainly the most powerful one because he had a following, and he had all the conservatives under 30, so they had to get rid of him, and that's definitely what happened.
He would not compromise on this issue. I mean, he went on it for a long, long time, right? Starting with with last year's 12-day war. I mean, he went to the White House and talked to Trump directly and said, you got to stop this.
And do you think that's when I think that's when the decision was made to get rid of him, and they tried one more time to bribe him in his meeting at the Hamptons, and he turned it down. And that was they had already, the plan was already in progress to kill him, but they were like, well, let's try one more time. And it didn't work. He turned down their money. And, of course, his and in retrospect, his wife, Erica Kirk, it's obvious she was put in his life. She's their whole life. She's a 17-year-old beauty queen somehow working with trafficking in Romania. It's just none of it. And so, what I say is, if the CIA had a vagina, she came out of it. And and everybody around him, from Tyler Bowden to Andrew Kovach, Mikey McCoy, his father, all those pastors. It's one big swamp, right? That's the swamp.
Well, that's what the Epstein files teaches us, right? I mean, these are extremely depraved people.
And what do you, by the way, what do you make of the journalists who had really great reputations up until the Epstein files, and now there seem to be, and it's like whether it's Epstein himself or whether it's is Epstein dead, or whether it's the files. You see people like Michael Schellenberger, Matt Taibbi. What do you make of that? Like them trying to dismiss what everyone sees.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a huge fan of Matt Taibbi's for the longest
Me
time,
too.
right? Starting with the 2008 Great Financial Crisis.
Yes.
He did amazing reporting in Rolling Stone, and I've been following his work for the past decade. I'm a huge admirer of his work, and I don't have any clue as to why he did what he did. There are theories that the IRS visited him, and that might have something to do with it. But usually in these cases, what happens is that you associate a certain group of people, they become your friends, you spend weekends together, you go on cruises together, your kids know each other, and you just want to stay in that circle, right? And staying in that circle just means you have to conform to the talking points.
And you think that's it?
That is a possibility. Okay. I think that you and I are able to do what we do because I imagine, I don't know about you, but we are marginal. We're very much marginalized in society.
Yeah, to say the least. Yes. Certainly on my part, very, very marginalized. And I got a good taste of it during Forced to Vote when I presented this idea that the whole left is supposed to be rallying around for decades, which they were. And then as soon as it became a possibility, they turned on me and they came at me as hard as possible and tried to discredit me, in every which way. They still do it to today. And not only that, but they got, useful idiots, people who I've known all my life to go along with it, and they got nothing out of it, right? Yeah. Which is, except they just got brainwashed and they were, go ahead.
And you were completely vindicated on Forced to Vote. I mean, 100%. You were absolutely right. Because Republicans did the same thing, right?
Say it again.
And it worked.
When the Republicans had McCarthy wanting to be speaker, they did exactly what we were advocating the squad to do for Forced to Vote, and it worked like a charm for them. They got everything they wanted. Gates.
Exactly. So it just shows you what a fraud AOC is.
Yeah, 100%. But I believe she'll probably be the nominee or the vice presidential nominee going in 2028. So there's no voting our way out of this. Well, I've known this now for a while, and you say that you think that the original MAGA coalition, the people like Tucker Carlson, the Candace Owens, the if they can somehow find a way to organize and come together, but doesn't that involve, you need labor, right?
What do you mean by labor?
You need unions.
Right. Yes. But unions have been decimated in America, right? I mean, they're no longer as powerful as they used to be. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Less than 10% of the workers are in unions, and most of them are government workers. But I said, like, if the railroads, that we almost had a railroad strike here, and then Joe Biden and the Democrats interceded to make it illegal for them to go on strike. And if they would have won that strike immediately, and it would have empowered workers across the country, which is why they had to make it illegal. And so if you get, so let's, for instance, if you got the railroad workers to actually not go to work, that would cripple capitalism in America. If you got the port workers to do the same, if you got the people who work at the Amazon fulfillment centers, or if you got the UPS drivers, if you got even like one of them, but if you got them all together, that would be it, and that's how you have to take over the country. That's what I think. You have to stop capitalism, and that's how you gain power. It's kind of like,
you know what?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't think of this before, but you convinced me. The key is labor, right? Because AI can replace actually the white collar class, teachers, professors, accountants, lawyers. They can be replaced actually pretty easily. But you need labor. You need essential workers. You need people actually do the real work. And we know this from COVID, right? Where during COVID, these people still had to work, but everyone else could just at home on their lap and display on their laptops. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the key is to galvanize the labor movement.
And, of course, they know how they've infiltrated the labor movement. So just like everything else is infiltrated, just like the Democratic Party, the Green Party, the Republican Party, the DSA, they're all infiltrated by the deep state and controlled, and it's all divide and conquer. And so just like the unions, so it's going to be very hard. But that's the only way we can, and the template is there from the truckers, right? So the truckers did it on even a small scale, and it worked. If we could get the AFL-CIO, which is the truck drivers, just them to do it, or if you just get the railroad workers, or if you get them in conjunction with the port workers, that's it. Game over. The people win. And of course, they'll try to do things like assassinations and again, more infiltrations, but that's to me that, because people like to say this, they say this a lot. You'll hear people say, oh, we need a general strike. Okay, that's a great idea. Stop saying that, right? Say something, specific and constructive. And what I'm saying, I think, is actually more specific and more constructive and actually something more likely to work. It's right. Go ahead.
Yeah, the caveat would be illegal immigration, right? So you ask yourself why the Democrats have let in, millions of illegal immigrants when Biden was in power. And it could be a possibility. I mean, like I'm speculating, but it's just to dilute the power of labor,
of course,
in the future.
Of course. Yeah. No, that's 100%. And to keep the people from coming together to fight the oligarchs, what they do then is you have workers fighting people who are in a more desperate situation than them, and look at that, and the immigrants who we overthrew their governments in their country and made their life unlivable, who come here. So now we got the people at the bottom fighting instead of people at the bottom coming together and fighting the people at the top, and it works perfectly. It's working, still working. People are cheering on what ICE is doing across the country, and again, we need to have we need to have a strong border and all that stuff, but the demonization of if I've always said this, if you find yourself angry at someone lower on the economic ladder than you, it's a good chance you're being manipulated by someone higher on the economic ladder than you. It's obvious.
And also we have to remember that ICE is also part of the technate plan, right? Because you want to create an AI surveillance state, so you need an enforcement mechanism, and that'd be ICE. So what's happening is that they're using illegal immigration in order to normalize ICE on the streets everywhere.
That's exact. And so, they don't need $80 billion to run an ICE, an immigration program. What they do is, if you want to create another authoritarian police state, and that's what you would do. And you're exactly right. And that's what the job of ICE there isn't really immigration. It's there to normalize this kind of authoritarian takeover of our life, this technate state. That's exactly what's happening. All right. This is always good to talk to you, but it's always so depressing. But it's good. You've got to see it first. You got to have the scales fall from your eyes, so then you know what to do about it. Does anything give you optimism, and what off ramps are there? Do you see for these worse outcomes?
So people like you, people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, give me tremendous hope for the future, because you're still allowed to say what you believe. You speak from the heart. You have tremendous audiences. Your audiences love you, and you know this for yourself. But your voice is resonating all across America and the world. So that's what gives me hope. The other thing that gives me hope is that the people in charge aren't that smart. They're not that strategic. We shouldn't give them too much credit. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're going to miscalculate. They're too arrogant. They're going to create opportunities for other people. And the third thing I will say is that the elite themselves are not unified. If they were, they could just do what they want. There are different factions of the elite fighting amongst themselves. And so this creates opportunity for new political movements that could possibly galvanize labor, can galvanize 99%.
Okay. Professor Jiang, I really appreciate your insight. I appreciate you talking to me and talking to our audience. We can't get this kind of information from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, or MSNBC or Fox News. They can't get it. We have to come here, which is why they try to marginalize us and try to take our advertising away. And so I just really appreciate what's the reaction to you? Why does the Chinese government allow you to do this?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm very much marginalized in China. Everyone thinks I'm an idiot in China. But because like the response is just to ignore someone if you don't agree with that person, right? The other thing is that I only speak in English to Western audiences. I don't have a Chinese online media presence. If I did, if I were influential in China, then the government would see me as a problem. So I avoid public appearances. I avoid online media presence. I don't talk to reporters in China.
Oh, okay. All right. So tell people where do you want people to find you? You have a YouTube channel now that is blowing up, right?
Yeah, right. So thanks, Jimmy, so much for platforming me. I really appreciate it. I love your show. I love what you do. I love to talk to you some more often whenever time permits. Hopefully we can make this a monthly thing or something, because like I just loved talking to you. It's like a kindred spirit. And I can say certain things on your show I couldn't say anywhere else because I'd be deplatformed. But if you want to follow my work, the best place is my YouTube channel, Predictive History, and my Substack, which is predictivehistory.substack.com.
Okay, fantastic. I feel the same way. I feel very kindred spirit, and hopefully we can share a meal and have a conversation in person when I come to China. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We'll stay in touch.
Okay, will do. Thanks again. Hey, come see us doing live shows. May 7th in Burbank, California. That's a Thursday. May 16th, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then we'll be in Oklahoma City, Spokane, Washington, and Tacoma. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.